Welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Dan Barker. I'm co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Today, we're going to be talking about Unite Auburn, a religious worship event that went viral last week after it sparked a mass baptism at Auburn University. And we'll be talking about FFRF's efforts to combat religious coercion in college sports. Joining me today are FFRF Senior Litigation Counsel, Patrick Elliot. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
And
Hello.
Also joining me are FFRF Staff Attorney Chris Line here in the studio. And Patrick and Chris were two of the drafters of FFRF's Pray to Play report, which detailed how universities like Auburn have allowed their football coaches to impose their personal religious beliefs on players by hiring Christian chaplains. So Patrick and Chris both know a lot. They know a thing or two about these issues. So Patrick, this mixing of sports and religion seems perennial around our office. Do you think it's ever going to go away?
Yeah, I mean, your observation is correct. Since I've been at FFRF, this does seem to come up every year. And I don't know that it's going to go away anytime soon. That's probably because when coaches have power, they tend to abuse that power. And sometimes that means pushing religion on their players. In the context of public schools, that's certainly a problem in our line of work. So I don't think it needs to be that way, but I don't see this going away anytime soon, Dan.
Do you think religion in the schools is like a major part of the work that you do?
That for the legal team, it's probably more than half of the work that we're doing is, in some sense, working to protect public school students from religious pressures, religious coercion. This issue, I guess, that we're talking about today, more so deals with the college environment, where we're not doing as much work. I think college students have a lot more freedom, a lot less susceptible to coercion, but not in the context of sports. I think certainly, and we can get into that today, I think certainly that's an issue still of concern.
So, Chris, you've been very busy fighting these battles for years. Tell us about this Unite Auburn event and why FFRF has gotten involved.
Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, we actually, before the event took place, we did receive a complaint that Hugh Freeze, that's Auburn's football coach, Bruce Pearl, their basketball coach, and Butch Thompson, their baseball coach, the Holy Trinity of coaches at Auburn, were involved in promoting a religious worship service that was going to take place on September 12th called Unite Auburn. It was supposed to be dedicated to worship and giving messages to Auburn students seeking to grow their faith in God, or for students who are curious about Christianity. The goal of the event, as we knew it, was to unite the Christian community of Auburn under one roof to worship God. So it was concerning these coaches were promoting the event, but we weren't actually able to get to it before the event took place. You know, it wasn't necessarily a high priority. It's not great, but...
you didn't have the gift of prophecy? No.
No, but actually, now it's come up, and now we've received dozens of complaints, and it's just going viral, what happened after the event. And we actually have a news clip here that'll kind of set up what happened.
Auburn University senior Michael Floyd says he will never forget what he witnessed on campus Tuesday night.
I've seen Auburn basketball beat Kentucky. I've seen Auburn football beat Alabama, but I have never seen something like I did on Tuesday night.
Thousands packed Neville Arena for a night of worship. When it was ending, one student wanted to be baptized. But without a tub, crowds started gathering at this lake at Auburn's Red Barn, where roughly 200 people gave their life to Christ. Even head football coach Hugh Freeze got in the water to help. And to think this all started because of a worship event. It's being called Unite Auburn. The woman behind this event says it began with just 5 girls meeting each week to pray in the arena, which grew to 200 students, which caught the eye of local ministries.
Who said, we want to get behind this. We want to see this turn into something much bigger.
And it did. Around 5,000 people attended Unite Auburn. It was free. Donors covered the cost. And Pruitt is already getting calls from other universities to bring similar programs to their campuses. She says something special is brewing.
We see God moving in our local churches. And so last night was just, a ripple effect of what is already going on.
A ripple effect they hope will spread beyond the plains.
Yeah, so you can see the biggest concern we had at the outset of seeing this is the football coach there, Hugh Freeze, being involved in baptizing a player. But just a little bit of looking into it, now we're also kind of wondering.
So the issue is not so much freedom of religion, but it's a state, it's a
Exactly.
public school, right?
Right, exactly. You know, if this were a private event, if like a group had rented out the building, held this event, they went and did the baptism and stuff, we wouldn't even be talking about it. I mean, that's, you know, free. Students have the right to religious freedom. The reason why it's a focus for us is A, that coach being involved, and then B, we're kind of, we've been investigating the university's role in organizing and promoting it. Like I said, those 3 coaches were promoting it. We submitted a records request. But just based off looking at it, the woman from that news clip, Tanya Pruitt, who organized the event, actually is the wife of the assistant basketball coach, who also, it seems, may have been involved in this. So, yeah, so we're kind of looking into what exactly the university's role was in this. And then now we got in this clip, this is Coach Freeze baptizing a player. Yeah, so you see there was a coach, university staff involved. We also know Jeremy Napier, that's chaplain for the men's basketball team, who is a staff member there, was part of planning the event. He admitted he personally baptized over 20 of the students. And, you know, we already have had trouble with Auburn. In fact, last year, the basketball coach, Bruce Pearl, took his players on a tour of the Holy Land in Israel, visiting locations important to Christians and Jews, and he actually described it as a birthright for college basketball. So Auburn has all types of issues.
This was a school-sponsored actual event, right?
Yes.
Wow.
So like I said, all 3 of the coaches at Auburn, baseball, football, and basketball, have been promoting and pushing religion. And, you know, this is not a surprise. You know, we wrote that pray-to-play report. We know that coaches are doing this stuff. And that they're using chaplains to do it, and then also obviously like getting involved themselves. Like,
well, let's ask Patrick about you. You were involved in this Pray to Play report, Patrick. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, this actually now goes back. It's probably about 8 years old, but it's the same issues coming up, and I think that's why Chris kind of being on top of this right away makes sense. This isn't our first rodeo. We know how these coaches have operated with some prior events and some prior pressures they put on their team to participate in those events. So, for instance, in the Pray to Play report, we talked about at Clemson University, the head coach there, Dabo Sweeney, baptizing a player on the field, assistant coaches organizing religious events for the team. So this seems to fit within what we talked about in that report in 2015. You know, part of what that talked about is the player and coach dynamic is, you know, players do what their coaches tell them. You know, they have a lot on the line, their playing time, their scholarship, potentially, you know, future career for a select few at a major university like Clemson or like Auburn. That's a serious contender for any of their, you know, for any of their players. So coaches abusing that power. And then the other aspect, which I think Chris kind of hinted at here, is, you know, the financial aspect. Is there state resources going to advance or push religion? We don't know how this was the basketball arena that was used for the major portion of this event. We don't know what financial arrangements were made for that, or whether you know, there was a sweetheart deal. In our Pray to Play report, we found out that was happening a lot. That you know, chaplains and people were getting free tickets comped by the schools. They were getting flown to locations to be chaplains, to stay at the team hotels. And so in the past, we've kind of seen a lot of public money being spent for religion related to the sports teams, especially the football teams, and sometimes the basketball teams. So I think those are aspects of concern here that kind of relate back to that prior Pray to Play report that we did.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Auburn is one of the worst colleges. So, you know, after the Pray to Play report, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of change, but there was some. Some universities did kind of scale back and make slight changes, you know, to lessen the appearance of how bad things were. Auburn was not one of those places. Auburn originally, they wouldn't even give us record. We had struggled to get records from them. We got records from several universities. And then Auburn now still, I mean, you can go to their website right now. Chet Williams, the football chaplain, listed as an employee. He's got a school email.
A chaplain.
Yes, yeah. So they have that. Obviously, I mentioned talking earlier. They have a basketball chaplain. So these coaches are pushing religion, and they've got chaplains on staff getting paid, to push Christianity at the school. And this is a public university. Yeah. So about Coach Freeze. We actually wrote about him in our report. He was an important figure when we did. We wrote that he cares more about converting players than about winning. There was a quote in the report, "When my life comes to an end, how much does the scoreboard really matter?" His wife also explained what he really cares about. She said, "His passion is to use football to reach others for Christ." Another article noted that the lengths to which he goes to inject Christianity into his football program is striking, even in the heart of the Bible Belt. And his first chaplain, Ken Smith, actually said, he sees coaching as a ministry more than anyone I've ever met. Freeze sees his position as head coach as a chance to win converts for Jesus. His team is a mission field. His chaplaincy is a tool to accomplish those conversions. So that's Freeze. So that was us writing about him when he was a coach at the University of Mississippi.
Well, it seems to me like if he wants to keep his job, the scoreboard should matter, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and unfortunately, he does a pretty good job of that, it seems, in terms of coaching. His teams do win. I mean, it's crazy that Auburn even hired him. So, besides the fact that he's always used his coaching position to promote his personal religious beliefs, that's well documented in our report. Some people, you may recall, he was actually forced to resign from his position at the University of Mississippi in 2017 after an investigation by school officials revealed a pattern of phone calls to female escort services. If he didn't resign, the school was actually said they were going to exercise the termination clause in his contract for moral turpitude. The chancellor there described the scandal as a pattern of personal conduct inconsistent with the standards of expectations of leader of our football team.
Maybe he needed these females to escort him to church.
Yeah, he also had, that's just the sort of the big scandal. He had some other issues related to finance, like NCAA financing, things like that. So besides just pushing his religion, not a lot of good reasons to have him as a football coach. He actually left, like I said, he resigned from Mississippi. In 2018, you'd be surprised where he ended up. He became the coach of Liberty University, the Christian school, and he was there until, I think, 2021. Now, this past year, 2022, Auburn hired him for about, when you look at his contract, about $6.5 million a year. They're paying this coach who, had those scandals in the past and now is still very clearly using his position to impose religion. He baptized one of his players there in front of everyone,
But besides all this shenanigans, is he a good coach? He must be.
Yeah, I think that from what I can tell, I think that's why they're willing to put up with both the, religious proselytizing that he does and any scandals, I think he had a good record at Liberty too, which, it's unfortunate. I just think these things to me would be not worth, both the cost financially and just having to deal with people like this.
So can't the school do something about it? Can't they rein him in or caution him? Well,
that's the thing. They're just not willing to. That's how powerful these coaches are in public university. They're just so powerful that even the school can't, isn't going to risk losing that coach. So they're not going to try to put any restrictions on him or anything like that, which they should.
We've seen that. We've seen that time and again, I think, Chris, especially with the really highly paid coaches, which you're going to see in football and basketball, and especially if they've been there for a while or they're winning, unfortunately. I think that comes into the calculus because we've actually been successful in some programs in stopping this when there's a new coach coming in. So a coach that comes from a smaller school and then goes to the big school, public university, Iowa State basketball program is one example that comes to my mind, but we've had some success. And Chris, I know this year you've also had some contact with, I think it's Colorado over Deion Sanders coaching and pushing Christianity on players. We may have better reception when it's a newer coach coming in rather than the major figure like the Dabo Swinney at Clemson or Hugh Freeze. Some of these coaches get to run their show. They may have more power than the president of the university or any board of trustees that's supposed to oversee their program. So I think there's a really like all of the state church issues we deal with, there's these power dynamics come into play. I think they get away with it in ways that, the volleyball coach or the golf coach just aren't going to get that leeway. They would get shut down. But these powerful coaches that want to push religion are getting away with it because I think the administrators don't want to, mess with that. They don't want to get called out. They don't want those coaches to leave. So there are some, interesting and difficult power dynamics with, especially in the football coaches. We say at FFRF in the public schools, at least at the, the high school level, we get more complaints over football prayers and coaches pushing religion than probably all the other sports combined. Chris, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think it's a football problem largely in the public schools that we see.
Yeah, no, it's definitely mostly a football problem. Like I said, that's why it's kind of unique here at Auburn that their basketball coach is also extremely bad with this, and then even their baseball coach, joined in this situation. But I just want to remind people, if you have any questions or anything that you want us to answer about this, you can email them to us, or you can email them at askanatheist@ffrf.org, or you can post those right in the comments here on Facebook, and we'll get to some questions here in a little bit.
I wanted to ask you, Patrick, were you working for us back when we complained about the football chaplain here at the University of Wisconsin under Barry Alvarez? Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I think, some of that predates my time. So I've been with FFRF for 13 years, and I have been involved in complaining about, which was funny at some places, it just so happens that there's one preferred religion. So at University of Wisconsin-Madison, there had been a Catholic chaplain that just so happens to align with the religion of the coach and now or former athletic director year after year. And that we were able to address some of the issues with him getting financial benefits like travel. But it's a difficult thing to completely stop because the coaches say, oh, this is just a friend of the team, and they'll bring that person in, or they'll get their travel financed privately. So there have been issues even at schools you wouldn't necessarily expect, like the University of Wisconsin, the University of Illinois. We've had problems at those places where the coach or the athletic director have a special connection to a priest or to a minister.
When we first started investigating that question, I called the University of Wisconsin's athletic department on the phone, and I asked to speak with the football chaplain, and they transferred me to the seminary's office where the Catholic priest had his office to speak with the official UW chaplain. So that tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he had been with the program for a very long time. I think we had done good work in decreasing that involvement and also getting the public money stopping to finance this chaplaincy at Wisconsin. But this goes back to your first question: was this is a perennial problem, and I think FFRF and our members and others should push back at it, because I think the universities kind of go along with it if they're not hearing about these problems.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good thing to point out here, is that when you're dealing with students like this, you've got student athletes at college. Like, as we know, the demographics are shifting very rapidly. So these college-age kids now, I mean, a good chunk of them, a third, up to like 50% of them, honestly, are probably non-religious now, you know what I mean, in a lot of places. Not necessarily at some of these southern schools, but, in general, the demographics are shifting quickly. And so that, not that it makes it okay, some of these violations, but, it certainly makes it more egregious when there's a bigger chance that a lot of the members of the team are not religious.
And it's not only that, but with the Alvarez chaplain case, it was two Mormon players who couldn't complain to the coach. They anonymously complained to us so that we could make the complaint, because there's no way they were going to stick their heads up and say, hey, I object to this Catholic prayer. So it's not just non-believers.
Oh yeah, and when we wrote that Pray to Play report, we were in contact with an anonymous player who we talked to and kind of brought up those concerns. In fact, most players don't feel comfortable bringing up, and even there's less coercion probably as a part of a job, but like even NFL players, will talk about how Arian Foster had come out after and talked a lot about his experience in college as a non-religious player, having to kind of just deal with the fact that it's a very religious environment in many of these school football programs, unfortunately, which, if it's
just you had mentioned the player for the Pray to Play report. So I interviewed him, at a prominent football program. This goes back to about 2015, and this atheist player couldn't really be out as an atheist on the team, but in fact, at one point was asked by the coach to deliver a prayer which he did because he was afraid of, what's the reaction going to be by my teammates in front of everyone, or what's the reaction going to be by the coach. So that was 8 years ago. I'm sure that's still going on just because of demographics, because there probably are a lot of people who are non-religious or who are non-Christian, and they just kind of have to play along with it. Even at this school happened to be, a major football school in the South. So I imagine that's probably similar issues could be going on at Auburn and other schools that are continuing to do these violations.
So before we take questions, I have a question for you guys. If a player is praying for God's help, isn't that breaking the rules of football? Isn't it against the rules to enlist outside help?
It would be, yeah. I guess especially if they believe that it's really going to help, then yeah, they're trying to cheat.
Isn't that cheating?
Conduct.
Dan, there is a lot of superstition involved in sports, so I think, I don't think you're going to make any headway with that kind of question.
Well, especially, when these very religious football schools play each other, like how does God decide which one is going to win if they're both, religious schools? Like I don't know how he picks.
Whoever gives more in the offering plate each Sunday, maybe, or whoever's coach is paid more, or
something
who knows?
along those lines, probably.
Or maybe the team that plays better.
No, that doesn't make any sense.
Anything else, Patrick, before we go to questions?
No, let's hear some questions if we have any coming in.
It looks like we do. Do you think there's a reason that so many sports coaches are frequently trying to indoctrinate their players? Well,
so actually, we kind of document this a little bit in the Pray to Play report that so coaching is kind of an insular area. A lot of people who go on to become head coaches at a school start off as assistant coaches at a school. So we document some of that in our Pray to Play report from what was going on in 2015, where you have prominent major coaches. They instill the religion throughout their program, including to their assistant coaches. Those assistant coaches go on to become heads of coaches at other universities and kind of keep that pattern going. So that's probably a lot of what it is just the built-in culture of the way football
Well, in
grows
Christianity,
like that.
we would call that discipleship training. You lead, the next generation's going to come along.
Right. So, at the same time, this could be used to reverse the trend. If we can get more secular coaches in there not using their position to push religion and having people learn under them and understand, the way that a football program should be properly run, they'll go on to be coaches on other teams and not instill religion and hopefully kind of, stop this.
It's like a virus, right? It catches, it's going to spread.
It just spreads, yeah.
The other benefit or the other reason why I think it's there is it's a recruiting tool. And you mentioned this or noted some of this in the Pray to Play report, even with this coach Freeze, who said he tells recruits and their families, that he believes in Jesus. And I think that's a selling point to some parents. Now, the problem being this is a public university and the coach shouldn't be getting involved. But I think at Clemson and I think at Auburn and other schools, those coaches know, how do I get this player? I'm going to really ramp up the religion during the recruiting calls. And in fact, at Clemson, there were sometimes prayers or chaplains involved in the recruiting process, which sometimes led to some NCAA violations or potential infractions. But I think that they use it for both they believe it, but I think they also are using it to recruit. How do I get this player here? What sets me apart from the other public universities? And they try to sell the parents on, hey, I'm gonna be a Christian with your son on this team.
So another question here. This seems to be a pretty massive violation of the Establishment Clause. Is this something the university could be sued over? You're our litigation expert, Patrick. Could we sue over this?
Yeah. So yes, but the problem is you would most likely need a player or somebody impacted by that practice to challenge it. And so in the past, for reasons Chris and I have already mentioned, you're usually not going to see a player on a team want to turn around and sue their coach and their athletic program. Sometimes we hear about these problems after they've left, or if we hear about it when they're there, they don't want to put themselves in jeopardy by suing and challenging that type of practice. So I think that there's a practical problem with suing is the players impacted or people part of the team, employees, are going to be afraid. But the actual answer is there a violation here that could be sued over? Yes, I think so. So, Chris, I don't know if you agree with that
Yeah,
too.
no, I think you nailed it. I think that's the big thing here. There's a lot of these programs that I would love to sue, Auburn being one of them for sure. I think one of the worst, most egregious situations where the football program is being used to push religion onto people. But we would need a student to come forward, and that's probably never, very unlikely to happen, even with the demographic shift, because teams are just so tight-knit too. You know, it's very much like military or army, so you like become a part of the team and you don't want to turn on the team, even if they're doing something wrong. I mean, that's how abuse scandals in other areas happen too, is just that, you know, it becomes a situation where you want to be a part of that team and you're not going to like turn on people, even if you disagree with something. And I would guess, like I said, because of the demographic shift, there's probably a large chunk of players out there who are just willing to just endure it. Yep, they'll just go along because they want to be a part of the team. It upsets them possibly, but they're willing to just power through that because they, you know, they're a part of a team. And I think that's honestly, from a, sort of a moral perspective, what makes it worse for these coaches knowing that they're probably, you know, alienating their players, but they just don't care because this is more important to them.
Because they want to win for the team and for God, right?
Right.
So, and also, isn't it true that cases like this can take years to work through? And Patrick, wouldn't it be, moot if once the student graduates? And wouldn't that be a problem?
Yeah, you're Dan, you're just too sophisticated, because that's exactly right, and I can explain where that has happened before. Is there's a college in Virginia, the Virginia Military Institute, where that happened. It's a public state school. It's not a football complaint, but they were doing prayers at all of their meals, and that's a very regulated military college. And so some of the cadets sued, and by the time things actually worked their way through the court, some of them had graduated, and so the courts actually have to say, well, we think your claims are moot against the state school to stop this. So you have another practical problem is, can you sue fast enough to block some of these things? And there are ways to do that, but it is a challenge to run the full course of a case, because students, you know, join a program and they're going to be gone within 4 years.
You used two different sports analogies there, to block these things and to run the course. Maybe another one could be that Auburn should declare a freeze on proselytizing at their university.
Yeah, and as Patrick's getting, I mean, that also is what creates another problem, because even if a player were willing to speak out, odds are it's going to be a player who's like a senior, someone who no longer has to worry about what the coach is going to do to them. And by then, like you said, with the timing issue, they're just not going to have time to sue. So you would need someone younger, more involved in the program, the type of people who are exactly under the coercive authority of the coaches, who are going to be afraid to cross them.
That seems, on its face, that seems like a flaw in the system. If it's a violation, then the plaintiff shouldn't matter once it's originally filed. But of course it does, doesn't it? With a case, you have to have a live case or controversy, don't you?
Right, and you could get them like interim relief. So you could sue to get a preliminary injunction, which would stop the thing. You know, you kind of go on a fast track to stop it.
Freeze.
But that wouldn't take you all the way, right, to freeze it. That wouldn't get you all the way to the end. So, you know, you're kind of raising a little bit of a technical issue, but I do think it's a practical problem with some of the school complaints we take. You know, oftentimes by the time you sue with even a high schooler, they may graduate by the time your case runs its course. So oftentimes our cases involve older students and younger students, and it's not really easy to do that at a college, because students are moving through within a 4 or 5 year span.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully though, somewhere, you know, probably not anytime soon, but with that demographic shift, hopefully eventually we're going to hit a peak point where some of these teams are majority non-religious, you know, are not, you know, that Christianity that seems to pervade football, especially in the South, will start to wane, and maybe we'll get a group of players who are like, hey, there's a bunch of us, and we now are sick of the coach doing this, and there's enough of us that we feel comfortable coming forward, and then hopefully that time we'll be able to take some action. We can start making some changes in these programs. Right.
We can score some touchdowns, maybe, or baskets, or whatever sport it is. There is one more question that's somewhat related, I think, maybe to the player who wants to complain. What are some ways to avoid God and blessings and miracle conversations politely from the so-called good people without offending anyone? I think we talked about that, right? Is there a way a player could complain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough one, because I think the level of offense is going to come from the person saying
Yeah.
it. You know, I found from my perspective, being in Wisconsin here in like a fairly progressive like city, if I let someone know, oh, hey, I'm not religious, don't want to participate in some sort of religious thing you're doing, it's usually fine. I don't really face a lot of pushback. I imagine in a place, some of these places where religion is so pervasive and strong, like there may be stronger reactions. I'm not sure, you know, if a person is the type of person who's going to feel like they should impose their religion upon you, they're probably going to be upset when you don't accept that. I don't really have good advice specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know if Patrick has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is more, I guess, an etiquette thing, Dan. So I don't know if you have ways to chime in on this. And I will say this about myself as an atheist and the others that I know. I think we are overly polite about this a lot of times. There are times where people are doing things that are religious that I don't enjoy, and I try to absent myself in a polite way and not try to make a scene or to purposely, you know, bother them. But there may be points where you do have to, you know, have that conversation. I think as Chris kind of flagged. You know, and as connected to our conversation today about sports, one of the problems is there might not be a way to avoid it. And one of the reports I remember from several years ago was a Jewish player who felt that he had to join the pregame huddles because for the Christian prayers, because he's like, I didn't want to be left out. So I think that there's sometimes a practical problem if you need to be in that room or in that space and somebody's doing a prayer. There just sometimes aren't good ways to avoid it. And so I don't have a great answer politely or etiquette-wise on how to deal with that. I think most of the atheists I know are extremely polite and probably overly taking, you know, pressure from religious people, and you know, they may not be used to pushback, but sometimes that might be the appropriate course, is to have that conversation before or after, you know, the religious activity.
Well, maybe on a sports team there is no real way to do it, short of risking getting kicked off the team. You know, I mean, if you go against the coach. But
and that, I mean, I think that exactly highlights the problem here.
Yeah.
There is no good way for you know, if there was an easy way for a non-religious person to opt out, to feel comfortable in these situations, then it wouldn't really be as big of an issue, especially in the college context. We were talking about a little bit older, a little more established, maybe feeling whatever. But because, you know, in these football programs, there's just no way anyone could feel comfortable, even just like walking away, not being involved, choosing to opt out of team events because there's going to be prayer or something like that. It's just not possible. And that just really highlights why this is so bad. There just is no good solution for someone who even, you know, isn't going to challenge this, but just wants to avoid it. You know, it's like, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I just want you to stop pushing your religion on me. That's not a choice for a lot of people in these programs. And so that's why things need to change.
Well, thank you guys for all your hard work, and you and the entire legal staff, not just you two, but your what do you call it, Pray to Play report that you came out with. You can find that online?
Yep, you can find that online. At some point here, we're definitely going to have to I mean, this was 2015. It's definitely due for an update. Hopefully at some point here, we'll get some time and we can do something similar.
So
again,
if we go to our
things.
website, legal, you can find the Pray to Play.
Yeah, if you just search Pray to Play on our website, you should be able to find it.
Well, thanks for being with us today, you guys, and for helping out.
Thank you.
So besides this weekly show on Facebook Live, we also have a weekly broadcast TV show. It's called Free Thought Matters. And this week, Annie Laurie and I are speaking with Mary Jo McConaughey. She's the author of the new book, Playing God, American Catholic Bishops and the Far Right. Here's a preview.
Abortion is such an American issue, and Pope Francis believes that there are other pro-life issues that are equally important, such as capital punishment, such as care for the environment. He's very, very serious about climate change. And that is something with which he is in opposition with the U.S. bishops, who frankly get a lot of their money from fossil fuel companies.
The American bishops are causing a lot of problems. You can see that show, Free Thought Matters, on TV stations all across the U.S. and on Facebook Live. And don't miss Free Thought Radio.
This week, Annie Laurie and Dan, as a guest is Robert P. Jones, author of The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy. You can find the show at ffrf.org/radio.
And if you want more information about FFRF, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member, thanks, and if you're not, please join us. We'll see you next week on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.